So anyway, Dane, I heard that if it itches, you're probably in the clear. If it drips, you're gonna need something. But anyway, so Dane, I was thinking for episode 114, the culture corner. You want to talk about Trump is a fascist, but the people saying that he's a fascist are trying to take our guns away. So how are we supposed to defend ourselves?
I mean, I would suggest to you that in one of those categories, you should probably not take them seriously. At least one.
Okay, we'll decide on the episode. And the Epstein didn't kill himself. It seems as though Chase Bank knows that the IRS is a fraud.
Imagine that.
Unbelievable. Glad somebody has their heads on a swivel.
Yeah.
And then the main was just the Fed meeting and deciding that we have too good a life and they're going to have to dial it down.
Got to tighten some belts.
To
say the least.
Just going to be ribs and dick at the end of it, as Theo Vaughn would say. So anyway, all that being said, we can agree on that. You want to jump into the show?
I think we should probably get going. Welcome to Weapons of Meme Destruction Podcast, episode 114, which can be found at wmdpodcast.com/114. You can find it on any podcast catcher. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. You can get the videos on Rumble, YouTube, and Odyssey. You can link up with us on Twitter and Instagram, but still not yet TikTok because we haven't got our third whack-a-mole head set up yet for you to go find us over there. But when we do, we'll let you know. And again, as we did with episode 113, before we jump into the show, we just want to remind you to either go check out 833stopwar.com or call the number 1-833-STOP-WAR and get in contact with your representative and or senator and tell them to support the House Resolution 87 as well as Senate Resolution 856 to support those senators and representatives who are behind the movement to invoke the War Powers Act, to get Biden to stop facilitating the ongoing humanitarian atrocity that's happening in Yemen and has been continuing with the help of U.S. logistics support, largely carried out by the United States ally in the region, Saudi Arabia, but to the so far in the world, as goes the United States, so goes the world in many of those respects. So if we can get those resolutions to pass and we can get America, the American citizens to say, stop doing this, then maybe we can end that war. And that would be one of the greatest things that any of us could do. So please check out that website, call that phone number, put your voice behind putting a stop to that. You know, every person counts. David? Culture Corner. Serious stuff.
It's possibly the most serious stuff we've ever talked about, Dane.
Cheeto Mussolini is no longer sufficient to warn us of the threat, the imminent and ongoing threat that is Donald Trump. He is now, not now, I guess he has been the whole time. He's not just Mussolini, he is full-blown Hitler. And we should be very, very terrified, according to the blue check marks.
He threatens our democracy and all it stands for.
The blue check marks over on Twitter. David?
It's interesting. I kind of want to start this conversation off with, like, what do you think that the people that are telling us that our democracy is being threatened, what do you think their definition of democracy is? I mean, let's call
whatever they want, right? If it gets them what they want in terms of policies, then democracy is upheld.
And by the way, when they get those policies, does it financially benefit them most of the time? Because I don't know about you, but being a public servant shouldn't pay you over the span of however long, multi millions of dollars.
As a matter of fact, I can quote somebody who was a Democrat and who many Democrats still hold in high esteem, Harry Truman, who said something to the effect of, if you get rich while serving the public, then you're probably a crook. And so, I believe even Harry Truman, the old A-bomb dropper himself, would agree with you, David.
That's weird.
Like that?
And the guy calling we call him the head of our country. He's calling this former head of our country a fascist and saying that he's a member of a almost terrorist. Did he say terrorist?
Who are we talking about? Biden?
When Biden came out with his 2 armed guards behind him and a backlit red backlit American flag.
Which he totally didn't rip off from the movie V for Vendetta.
Definitely didn't. And he definitely wasn't trying to come up with visuals that would be more aggressive than normal. When he came out and said that the MAGA Republicans are to be stopped at all costs because they're the greatest threat to our democracy. I just want to know what under what auspices are they the greatest threat to our democracy? I would say, okay, cool. Then let's open up everyone's diary. Let's go to everyone's diary and open it up and just see how much of a threat to democracy is every one of our representatives, starting with Biden and his son, and then trickling down.
Well, the fact that democracy is a nailing jelly to a wall sort of endeavor, which is just the way they like it, because in true 1984 Orwellian fashion, the more they can manipulate language and get it to always conveniently align with whatever their principles and values are and stand opposite the people they politically disagree with, the better for them. So I think it's a bit of a fruitless or perhaps useless endeavor to try to, engage in this mental fuckery that they always want us to engage in and try to come to terms on what we agree democracy is or isn't and what it should or shouldn't do, and just kind of examine them in their own words to see if they are logically consistent. And which is what spurred on this particular conversation in the Culture Corner today, is because basically since 2016, we have these types of people, and I'm going to get to 2 particular individuals.
What do you mean, these types of people?
I'm going to get to it here in a second. The direction these types of people have been pushing with that sort of nebulous type language that always happens to find them as the ones in power and calling the shots. The first one over on Twitter is an account named Andrea Junker, and I could not possibly pick a more appropriate last name for the opinions that this person has. I don't even know if this is a real person, but the woman in the picture is a woman, so I don't know if that's the actual woman behind the account. But she writes, quote, 1923, Hitler's coup failed. No real consequences, no changes. 10 years later, he and his Nazi henchmen took over Germany. 2021, Trump's coup failed. No real consequences, no changes. 20 months later, he is holding hate rallies and his MAGA henchmen are still in Congress. So that's what Andrea has to say. And let's move on to an actual blue check mark, one who had a show on, I believe it was MSNBC for the longest time, Keith Olbermann.
I thought you were going to say Brian Stelter.
Well, these people's opinions are pretty much interchangeable.
Olbermann. He went from sports to politics.
I think he was politics first, and then to sports, and then now he's.
Then he's question mark, like he called people cowards for not getting their shot. And
he's the white haired, glasses kind of.
He's the guy that every man aspires to be.
Oh yeah, and despite his vicious rhetoric, he's very terrifying. That very imposing figure.
Yeah, I'd hate to go toe to toe with an Olbermann.
Anyway, he actually does have a blue check mark, and he has this to say. And again, both of these, as you see how she referenced the quote-unquote hate rally of Trump, and then you're going to hear in the Olbermann quote, he's also talking about a Trump speech. As we record this on September 23rd, 2022, it was either last week or the week before, Trump is kind of starting to gear up his 2024 campaign again. And so he is doing...
Despite a multitude of federal indictments threatenings of...
He's doing rallies around the country, very campaign style, talking to his base, yada, yada, yada. So he said some things that these people find offense with, which prompted their tweets. But anyway, Keith has this to say, quote, "After last night's orgy of hate and threat in Ohio,
sounds sexual.
We must recognize that Donald Trump is a clear and present danger to the future of this nation and to the life of every one of its citizens. And we must, as a nation and as citizens, defend ourselves now."
If he truly was,
End quote.
do you think you would have to tell people that? Do you think that you have to inform somebody that somebody is unhinged? Do you think I have to watch out for that guy on the corner next to the gas station that's arguing with a fucking fire hydrant? Maybe you shouldn't have a conversation with him. Maybe you're gonna meet obstacles adhering you to him as a human being in a conversation in a given moment. No, you usually don't have to be told someone's crazy. You can usually smell it on them or at least see it on them from a distance. So it sounds a little bit like it's hyperbolic. Can I say that? Do you think Olbermann's being hyperbolic right now?
I mean, that's a rhetorical question.
The journalistic fulcrum that is Keith Olbermann.
Yeah, the totally unbiased, just giving you the facts, no punditry at all.
Nope.
Yeah, that's exactly what Olbermann's doing.
That's where I take my cues from.
But what's interesting about these two tweets and the reason why we chose them for the Culture Corner is obviously the theme running between them and people of this certain political bent. Andrea is more on the nose with it by explicitly violating Godwin's law and making the link between Trump and Hitler. And Olbermann, although he has in the past made Hitler references, not in this case, but calling him a clear and existential threat and the fact that we need to defend ourselves. The theme running here is that Trump is obviously so dangerous, whether he is Hitler-esque or not, that we need to defend ourselves. Now, I did not go back.
Not ourselves, our democracy. Don't forget that. Country.
Of course, but
it's going to fumble our country into the drain.
Right. I only have so much capacity for masochism. And so I'll be completely candid with you. And I did not go back through the months or years of these two dipshits' Twitter histories to be able to find references where every time there's a mass shooting, as they always like to do, make political hay out of, that they want to completely disarm everybody. And the Second Amendment is purely advisory and has no force or effect in terms of actual rights, is I would just have to ask these individuals, are we supposed to believe you on the Trump thing? Or are we supposed to take your advice on the guns thing? Because as big and scary as those black guns are with the big, magazines that have too many bullets and blah, 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 blah.
Excuse me.
David.
African-American guns.
They're very racist. That's why they hate the color of the guns.
African-American guns.
Despite how scary they are, let's say that we conceded all of their, bullshit about the Second Amendment. You would think that if Trump was as scary and terrible and fascistic as they claimed, that we would want to have a means to, as Olbermann says, quote, and as citizens, defend ourselves now. We must defend ourselves now. With what, Keith? Biden tells us all the time he's got F-15s and we don't. Let's say the MAGA people win and get Trump back in office in 2024. You think he's going to use those F-15s? So what are we supposed to defend ourselves with, Keith? Andrea? What? Do we take you seriously on the Trump shit, or do we take you seriously on the gun shit? Or I posit to you a third option, the sanest option. Do we take you seriously on none of your shit because you are mindless fucking idiots and you are contributing to the division in this country that really puts us right in line for, if not Trump, some sort of Hitler-esque person to take rise and actually rule with the iron fist that you're afraid Donald's going to do?
I don't like to give credit where I don't think it's due, but I think at this point, I can't give total credit, so bear this in mind. I think CNN's new owner, clearing out some of these rhetorical, would that be the right? Not rhetorical. Anyway, all these people that were espousing very pedantic views that were definitely hedged in one way. They're clearing them out. Everybody that was associated with a certain shift is being cleared out. And I appreciate that. But it brings me back to another point. There used to be journalistic integrity. You used to have to be held accountable for what you said on your shows. Like, if you think that you can come out and say that one side that believes in one person is legitimately a threat to everyone, and you don't have evidence to back it up, you don't have any ties to back it up, you just have feelings and ethos, and you can appeal to a people's emotions to get them to basically follow your every whim, I'd say that's manipulation. I'd say that's using your pulpit for the wrong reasons. And I'd say you, Mr. Keith Olbermann, are just as big a threat to our democracy, seeing as you're on TV every fucking night. You're just as big of a threat to our democracy as Trump is. So, okay, you shut the fuck up. You go away. Take all your little cronies with you, your seltzer, your lemon, your whatever the hell else is out there.
Seltzer and lemon.
Seltzer. Thank you. Yeah, I work on levels.
Yeah.
Take all of them and go fuck yourselves. Live on an island in Indonesia with all of your millions. I don't give a shit. But stop telling me what the biggest threat to my country is when you have no idea what a normal fucking life is. Ever. So, all that being said, if you have a pulpit, and we have a very small pulpit, I'd call it more of a soapbox.
It's growing. It's a big pulpit.
It's
more than average sized.
Which is nice. What we'd tell a chick in a bar, but when she got home, she'd be like, that's a pretty small pulpit.
Listen, you're not going to write home about it, but it'll get the job done.
Listen,
okay?
if I do nothings around the pulpit to make up for the size of the pulpit, you should appreciate it anyway. I'm going to work for it. Anyway, more importantly, I'd say the biggest, it's funny when you point a finger, there's always at least three pointing back at you. When you're saying that something is the biggest threat to our democracy, I tend to think that you are the biggest threat to our democracy. You are not reporting on Hunter Biden's laptop. You are not reporting the stories that make your side look bad. When was the last time Keith Olbermann shit on Biden? Please, give me a clip. One. Okay, cool. So now you're not unbiased. Now we know you're biased. So now we know you're using your pulpit for disingenuous reasons that probably behoove your own machinations. So you are just as big of a threat to our democracy, to our information gathering, as Trump is. So the only kind thing that you could do, realizing that you're your own villain that you created yourself, is to remove yourself. So Keith, you step down. Tell you what, let's start a petition. If Keith Olbermann steps down from whatever pulpit he's on right now, it's probably MSNBC at 11:15 at night for 5 minutes, which is about as much as people can handle him. If he steps down, I won't vote for Trump. How about that? Put your money where your mouth is. I will forego my salary and people will not vote for Trump if you are removed from your pulpit.
Well, David, you even subtly suggesting that you might countenance the idea of voting for Trump pretty much makes you a brown shirt. I don't know if you noticed that, but
what does a brown shirt mean?
It was Trump's kind of paramilitary, or sorry, not Trump. Geez, see now these idiots are invading my thoughts too.
Insidious it is.
It was Hitler's kind of like paramilitary, groups before he got power in Germany that would go around and like terrorize people to basically justify Trump coming to power, that kind of stuff. So sending out the brown shirts is synonymous with, modern day leftist Democrats saying that Antifa should go out and create acts of terror, or that it's not so bad if Antifa
it's not
does
okay.
it. Because,
it's not bad. It was a peaceful protest of a BLM protest burned down a building. What? Do we really need that building anyway? Well, come on.
So anyway, I mean, Keith is going to write you off for,
I'm a heretic.
Throwing your hat in the brown shirt.
Fuck, I'm a right-wing conspiratist.
Yeah. So listen, I mean, Keith, Andrea, the rest of you fellow paint chip eaters,
you're so smart.
Like none of us take you seriously.
They're so smart.
So I mean,
you're so pretty. You're so attractive.
Feel free to keep making complete asses of yourself in public, because
everyone wants to be you.
As you are fans of saying all the time, the right side of history.
Good luck.
I have no doubt that, at least for the foreseeable future, the history books will look favorably upon you, because your regime, the people whose talking points you mindlessly regurgitate, are basically writing all the curriculum. But, as the analysis starts to sober up with the passage of time, I have a feeling, just a hunch, a premonition, if you will, that people might look back and see the things that you people had to say, and how it contributed to the divisions in this country, as David was laying out, and maybe might not have such nice things to say about you in the future. Now, whether that matters to you at all or not, because I would assume it does, since you say that it should always matter to us, and that's why we should, follow hook, line, and sinker everything you have to say, despite the fact that they're completely contradictory phrases. Maybe make some time. Self-reflection. Self-reflection is your friend.
Unless, of course, they have the ability to remove those clips from our ability to reclaim those clips, which would make them more and more virulent in the moment.
Keith.
And it's not like they haven't done it before.
Hey, listen, Keith and Andrea. Even though TikTok is canceling us and any of the other platforms could pull our stuff down, guess what? First of all, the internet's forever.
We're going to keep coming.
And second of all, we have copies on copies on copies on copies of this podcast.
Dane, are you trying to get us suicided?
No. When I'm saying it, no, I'm trying to unsuicide us. I'm trying to say that we have a doomsday button.
I was like, Olbermann, not so much. Like, come suicide me, Olbermann.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Olbermann, his wrist will break. His noodle wrist will break in a stiff wind. So I'm not really worried about him. But yeah, go ahead and try to delete your tweets and cancel or whatever. We got receipts, and we're gonna keep them forever. So take us down. We'll just keep popping our heads back up elsewhere. With that being said,
in the most surprising places,
in the Epstein did not kill himself segment, we got a little bit more creative with this one this week, and because we want to point out to you that even establishment mega banks like Chase Bank, the heirs to JP Morgan and all of the Gilded Age, chicanery that went on with that whole situation, even they recognize the IRS for the fraudsters they are. And we have personal anecdotal evidence to prove it. So recently, with my business partner, we started a small business in Florida.
Which I wasn't invited to, by the way. It's like he doesn't trust me with business. What means that I'm so unhinged that I can't be a business partner? How much do I have to actually do? You want my money? Yeah. Good.
For anybody who has tried to jump through the various hoops of starting a business and making it operational within the regulations that the dipshits in DC have set up for us, that to start your business, you need what's called an EIN number, which is the number that's associated with your business for tax purposes. And you won't be surprised to learn that you have to pay the government for the privilege of them invading your business's books to tax you in the first place. And in order to do that, you have to pay them a $250 fee. Well, when I paid said fee, I got a notification immediately from Chase Fraud Alert that said that they declined the $250 charge on my card from the IRS to provide me with an EIN number to get taxed in the future on, because it looked like fraud to them. And my business partner was in the room when this happened, and we had a nice little chuckle about it, that even Chase Bank recognizes the IRS as the fraudulent organization that it is. And I had to go through the process of reauthorizing the transaction so that they could take $250 from me for the privilege of continuing to take more money from me in the future. And that's just funny. And
if you
that's why we
remember,
want to talk about
to
it.
harken back to episode, I don't know what episode that was, but when we were all getting our bailout checks and we were all doing our taxes, I said that I did not receive my bailout check because I didn't check my fiscals. And I got a $600 check that I didn't recite to the government. And they came back and took that $600 check from me. But again, to reiterate my standpoint, that check was to help me get out of the situation that they put me in with their fucking policies. But the IRS said, no, we don't want to help them that much. Give me that shit back. So, with our story last week, well, the week before last, with the IRS hiring 87,000 new
and on
employees.
Episodes previous, the 87,000, the 1,250 IRS agents who skipped paying taxes themselves.
And now they're getting audited.
Yeah.
But how much does an IRS agent make?
I don't know, but if you keep talking, I'll look it up.
Please. So anyway, all I'm saying is like they said to pass this 87,000 new hirees at the IRS that are all going to be armed, by the way. That they're only going to go for the people that are making over $400,000 a year. They're only going to go after the upper class. They're only going to go after them. That's all they're going to do. So how much, Dane, does a IRS agent make in the fiscal year?
So it looks like the annual salary is it depends on the country, or sorry,
Sure.
the state. But the average comes out to around $50,000 a year.
Is that $400,000?
The highest is Washington at $72,000 a year, and the lowest is the state of North Carolina at $43,000 a year.
I'm sorry, you must be. You're not. We're not doing the same math. Are we speaking dollars or euros here? Are we speaking?
We're talking.
This agency that promised you that all of their new hires are going to go exclusively after people that make over $400,000.
We're talking Zimbabwean clamshells.
Started off the regime by attacking their own that are making less than a far cry less than $400,000 a year. It's making at the tippity top $75,000 a year.
72. I give you a whole lot of confidence they ain't gonna come after you.
Mm-hmm. That's all I'm saying. If you want to keep believing these motherfuckers, that's a soft, yeah.
Yeah, and listen, like we said a couple episodes ago, we don't have to go too back far in the too back far. Yep, that's proper English that we
we're
teach.
Sticking with it and we're going forward. Let's go.
We don't have to go too back far, to let you know that I did it on purpose and I'm gonna do it again. In the time machine to give you the Epstein history lesson for this one
Christ.
is
They can't
not only for the reasons David just stated, should you not trust these lying pieces of shit, but apparently Chase, which is about as elitist and in bed with
lying piece of shit,
in bed with the power brokers all throughout DC as you can possibly get, even they are their ears perk up with suspicion at the fraudsters that pervade the Internal Revenue Service.
That's like going into the business with the mafia and you'd be like, okay, yeah, I want to go over here. They're like, nah, we don't fuck with them. They don't do good business. It's like, but you're a crime organization. And they're like, yeah, we know. And they do crime way better.
or as sometimes we like to say is, if there's one thing the government hates, it's competition. So, even if you are an organized crime syndicate, the only reason why you're going to get prosecuted in any way, shape, or form is because you do the government's job in terms of extortion a little bit better than they do.
And the only reason I brought up my check was because I felt just as virulently...
You're still very upset about it if you can't.
...violated as he did. And it's not about the money. It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. It's like, or do you want me to do it in Joker voice? It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. And I'm going to give it to him. Anyway, the point is that it's whatever rhetoric they tell you, just go ahead and assume that they're fucking with you.
Believe the opposite.
Right.
I forget, it was within the last handful of episodes. That was one of the takeaways.
We say it a multitude of episodes.
How do you predict the future in the United States of America? Is you just believe and act in the exact opposite of the way that the power brokers and opinion molders tell you should.
Yeah, because what is power like?
I don't know.
More power.
Oh, what is it like? I thought you went like you were trying to say. Like,
no,
like?
How does it get it? By keeping the power less?
Yeah.
More powerless.
Of course.
So when they say we're only going to go after these huge corporate funds that are going to, and we're never going to touch your funds. How many lawyers do you know?
I know one.
I know one.
I know a couple. Yeah.
You know a couple. You know a couple. A few of them. But the casual listener, probably zero.
Yeah, by and large.
By and large.
Unless they've needed one's services for any number of things.
The whole point being, these corporations that they say they're going to be taking money from, they have
teams.
A building, a skyrise full of teams that are figuring it out every cent they can save that fucking year. And you think one little IRS agent going, we need more money, showing up on their door is going to do anything to them?
They're not even going to waste their time.
But when
you're low-hanging fruit, citizen.
Right.
They can just fucking take you to the cleaners, no questions asked. What are you going to do
the wrong time? You think you getting a fucking little Amazon package of a dildo that you're supposed to be getting around this time, and all of a sudden it's a fucking IRS agent asking you a bunch of questions with a gun on his hip.
Which I like to think of IRS agents as synonymous with being human dildos. They're pretty useless.
It's fair.
They're
not the dildo, not the rabbit that has the little vibrator on your schmutz, but like the one that was just old school that's like kind of fleshy looking and maybe has like a vein or two.
And just looks really sad.
It's like, it's floppy. It's not even hard. It's like,
yeah. Mm-hmm. Not that we have a whole lot of experience with dildos.
I've never played with a dildo.
We've just seen movies.
I can imagine.
I think we should move on to the main part of the episode.
You don't want to talk about dildos more, Dane?
No, I'm good. That's that.
Not dildos with IRS agent badges and pistol pieces.
That brief conversation satisfies my dildo quota for the next decade or so.
Oh, you were satisfied, were you?
Yeah. Always left me satisfied and smiling.
That's what she said. Boom. 2 Michael Scott references in back-to-back episodes.
We're knocking it out of the park.
En fuego.
So, with that being said, the main part of the episode we're talking this week is, as I mentioned previously, we are recording this on September 23rd of 2022. And earlier this week, I want to say Tuesday or Wednesday, I forget which, might have been Tuesday. The Fed chair, Jerome Powell, had another meeting where he talked about Fed policy and announced another 75 basis point rate hike to the federal funds rate. And for those of you who don't know, 75 basis points is 0.75%. So 100 would be a 1% raise in the federal funds rate. And if you watched, and I thought it was rather odd that this man have no misgivings about it. This man is one of the most powerful human beings on earth. When he is the head of the central bank of the world's reserve currency. Don't get it twisted about how much power this man has. And yet his speech had like 7,000 views on YouTube. Now, I'm not saying that he should be viewed like a celebrity or anything like that, but I'm saying that this man has very real impacts. Him and, the other dipshits that, are all throughout the Federal Reserve System. They have a lot of control over your life. And I'm not saying everybody needs to care about what he has to say, but, that's why you come to Weapons of Destruction, to give you the boring shit in a little bit more entertaining language. So, Fed Chair Powell had a few...
Fisher Powell!
Powell. I feel like I said Powell.
Yeah, you did. It sounded like Fisher Powell!
Yeah, Powell. he had some interesting things to say. And when you read through or you read between the lines on what he had to say, understanding the way these people think will help you understand the world a lot better and hopefully get you to ask some questions that lead you to a little bit more research that gets you to prepare yourself for the kind of shit that they are pulling on a regular basis. Because to any extent that the political leftists are correct about the gap between the rich and the poor growing and all of that kind of stuff, and they are correct, at least in terms of identifying the problem, they're never correct with the solutions, because to them, the Fed is completely non-existent, I suppose, is to any extent that that's happening, that's an ongoing phenomenon in the world, you can look almost exclusively to central banks and their policies as the reason why that's happening. But before I get into, because I feel like I've been talking for too long already, before I get into what Fed Chair Powell had to say, David, did you want to, break up my filibuster here a little bit, or you just want me to get right into it?
I didn't have any words other than the Fed Chair Powell. Like, I just know if a bank manager is talking, you should probably listen. And if he's the manager of the global federal bank, he's kind of telling you that your life is either going to be really great or really suck in the next couple of years. So you should perk your ears up. And it's funny that you mentioned the 7,000 thing. Like 7,000 views for that. How much did Cardi B's WAP get in the first week? Like, come on, man. Like, that's... And I understand it's more entertaining to be entertained, but you have to kind of dip your toe into like some amount of education. This isn't even educational. It's just like knowing that you're being fucked. Like,
right.
If you know you're being fucked, like you can be unfucked by knowing how you're going to be fucked. So don't let them fuck you the way they say they're going to fuck you.
And I completely understand the whole
apathy,
the whole sentiment that ignorance is bliss kind of thing. It's kind of maybe for some people you might not want to find out how you're getting fucked. So maybe that's why you don't watch speeches from Fed Chair Powell. And listen, this is no shade to anybody who doesn't want to watch it. Because like I said, some people only have so much
bandwidth.
Tolerism for masochism, as I was alluding to with the Junker and Olbermann tweets, and so I completely understand it. But it is rather important to understand how these people operate and what they think, and so that you can hopefully position yourself accordingly to prepare yourself for whatever the next clusterfuck is that they're in the current process of creating. So I'm going to give you the very condensed Cliff Note version of what Powell had to say. But basically, his conclusions are that there is too much aggregate demand. And I'm going to explain some of these words as I go. There's too much aggregate demand. There's too much savings. And there is too little production capability in the overall economy in order to bring down inflation to a sustainable rate, as the Fed would say, which is roughly 2%. Now, basically what he's saying there is we need to destroy jobs, right? Because aggregate demand is a concept, and I'm going to get into Keynesian economics here in a second. Aggregate demand is what Keynesians say is the driver of an economy, right? If the economy is hurting, we need to stimulate aggregate demand. We need to get people to go out and spend money, right? You'll hear this term all the time from them about the velocity of money. And the problem with looking at it that way is you are only focusing on the demand side of the supply and demand concept, the unbreakable law of economics of supply and demand. And so when Powell says there's too much demand, there's too much savings and too little production, what he's saying is people continue to spend money despite the lagging economic indicators, with the exception of employment. We'll get to that in a second. And we need to stop that, because as long as they're spending money without a corresponding rise in production, that's what causes inflation, right? Again, it's not his fault for printing 40% of all the dollars that ever existed within the last 18 to 24 months. It's people spending too much.
And I'm sorry, but
that's the way he's thinking about it.
Capitalistic society, if there's more of a thing, does that give more value to it or less value to it. Just on basic ones and zeros of economic fundamentals.
More useless pieces of paper that have nothing of corresponding value behind them other than the belief that they will be able to pursue goods and services in an economy. Printing more of those green pieces of paper is not going to make those green pieces of paper more valuable. It's going to do the exact opposite, less valuable.
And the point is that they thought that it was necessary at the time to print more of those to bail us out from the policies that they were enacting to save us from a thing that we didn't need to be saved from, which we can debate later on later episodes. And when more information comes out, we'll probably see more and more that wasn't to be fearful of from day one. And they may or may not have done it then, but his answer to shutting down the entire globe, the entire country, us doing nothing for fucking 2 years, was to print more money. All I can say is that is legitimately saying, I'm going to help you by telling you to stay home and I'll break one of your legs.
Now, and again, why did he come to the policy conclusion that money needed to be printed? Because the economy was shut down, people were thrown out of work suddenly, and so they needed money to what? Stimulate aggregate demand. The thing that he is now saying is staying too high for too long, and that's what has inflation persisting.
That's what it is.
The very reason for the destructive policy in the first place is because his theory, Keynesianism, is focused on just the demand side of the equation, almost to the complete exclusion of the supply side of the equation. Now, what that means in layman's terms, and the figure that he threw out is about 1.3 million jobs need to be lost. Because he's saying, listen, you stupid rubes, you had too much saving.
Do you hear it?
You had too much savings, and your wages are rising too high. There's too many of you that are employed, and you won't stop spending your money. So I know one way I can make you stop spending money. I make you lose your job. If you don't have it coming in, you can't have it going out. And so that's the ultimate conclusion.
When really, he should be the one losing his fucking job because he made this market in the first place.
Now, that's the ultimate conclusion of what his policy is. And he had a quote in there, I'm paraphrasing, where he said, I'm never going to say that too many people are working, but too many people are working. Right? So this is that, Orwellian doublespeak that people in these positions of power always do to again, always avoid responsibility for their actions.
Hey, Dane, from that phrase, shit always rolls downhill, right?
Mm-hmm.
So why are you blaming the person that's covered in the shit that rolled down the hill? Shouldn't you blame the guy that took the shit that started rolling down the hill that collected other shit? Shouldn't he be the first one on the chopping block? But it's never that way. It's never that way in this entire fucking process. That's our whole point of this, is that the people in power will always blame those that they fucking subjugate to their wills and wishes. And when it doesn't work out, they blame the people that were affected by the things that they said and enacted and will hold them accountable, and they are never held accountable. They actually walk out scot-free. Like, to harken back to the last episode when we were saying that Trump was, it was this episode, fuck. Trump is a fascist. Okay, if we're going to hold him to that standard, then what is fucking George W. Bush? A warmonger? He created a war that lasted 20 fucking years. What's Obama? He kept that war going and made it even more of a policy. Like when do we actually hold the people like Fauci? Fauci's the one that said that we needed to lock everything down. When is he going to be held accountable? He was directly tied with the gain of function research, which was federally sanctioned and denied that it should ever happen again. He started it back up, and then his lab that he was fucking supporting may or may not have spread it. The people that do these things are never held accountable. It's always us. So why do we fucking keep playing this game? That's my question to you.
Now, I hear what you're saying. I hear that you're saying, guys, listen, you're talking ivory tower stuff. You're talking economic theory and philosophy and all that kind of stuff. And what does that really matter? Because what matters at the end of the day is the nuts and bolts of the thing. And the nuts and bolts of the thing seem to be coming apart at the seams. We don't have time for ivory tower contemplating and pontificating about what should or shouldn't be done. We need to just get to the nuts and bolts of it. And here's why I think that opinion is a little bit misguided, and that both theory and practice need to be taken into account. Because you're probably thinking, well, in my sort of 50,000 foot view of it, I've always heard that unemployment or employment, the contrary of that, is a good indicator of a strong economy. We want more people to be employed because that's what is an indicator of a strong economy. Now, this economy seems to be hurting. So why would Powell be advocating at this time for a policy to throw people out of work if we're trying to strengthen the economy? And here's why the theory informs that decision, and why, to David's point about throwing the bums out, so to speak, why the fact that the Federal Reserve System is predominated with Keynesians who are, just this side of, drunk, drugged up, homeless people that are shouting ridiculous nonsense into the air, but getting their way in terms of policy, and why they need to be thrown out is because their theory tells them what to do, which creates the policy and practice, which creates all of these distortions in the first place. So back to the point I was making about focusing on the demand side to the exclusion of the supply side. If your theory is that aggregate demand is what's going to stimulate the economy, not only are you going to print off tons of dollars, which creates inflation, the problem that we currently have now, but then to fix that problem, again, you're only looking at the demand side. You're saying, I need people to spend less, so I'm going to throw them out of work, which again, contradictory to the idea that we need good and high unemployment with high wages to have a good, strong economy that would stimulate that demand. What it completely ignores is the fact that there are supply side issues that were created by those things. So when you shut down the global economy, it's not like you just turn the light switch out on a factory one night and say, okay, I'm ready to fire up. 2 years later, turn the light switch back on, and you're suddenly at max capacity. There are intermediate stages of goods that need to go into final production products that takes a long time to get that machine revved up again. There are supply chain bottlenecks as a result of those lockdowns, those political decisions to lock down the world and close economies. There is, of course, some role played by the goods and services disruption going on because of the war in Ukraine. That is a factor as well, but that's not as big a factor as the Biden administration would tell you.
How much money are we sending over there?
None of this is accounted for when you're only looking at the demand side. And when you try to say, I'm going to raise the federal funds rate because I'm going to throw 1.3 million people out of work, none of that fixes all of these other supply chain issues that I just talked about. And so it's because their theory myopically focuses on one side of the ledger, almost to the exclusion of the other. As the old saying goes, if you get the diagnosis wrong, you can't possibly arrive at the correct cure. And often, what you prescribe is going to wind up killing the patient. And that's exactly what Powell just said this week that he's going to do. He's going to kill 1.3 million patients, metaphorically, by throwing them completely out of work.
Or, here's my tin hat. A theory, hypothesis, whatever. What has always bailed this country out of every fiscal problem that it's ever had, as far as this current generation knows? War. What's been festering? Just smoldering. You just mentioned it.
David, you're going to make me destroy that meme.
Please.
Don't even put that out there, because this is exactly what they say.
Please.
And it's categorically incorrect.
All I'm saying is that is what they're saying. We're going to destroy how many jobs? 1.3 million?
1.3.
1.3 million.
That's his estimate for what it's going to take to start bringing inflation down.
And if you think that they're going to take any onus for any of the things that they made this situation for themselves, cite my rhetoric 5 minutes ago. My whole point being is that I have a feeling, a hunch, a premonition, if you will, that somehow, some way, this problem in Ukraine, this unfeasible conflict with China, this madman of a dictator in Russia, I have a feeling. And I don't like it, and I don't want it to be true any more than you do, that there's going to be a war that they're going to try to fucking get as much profit out of as possible. Because that last war that they, committed for 20 years and led to fucking nothing and even pulled out to the so far. I just heard a story that they asked the Marines that were on the base to clean up the trash because the Taliban said they wouldn't reclaim it because it was too messy. So Marines that were fighting the Taliban had to clean the airways for the Taliban before they retook it over after we left. Like, granted, might have been a bullshit story, sure. But is it any more far-fetched than after a 20-year war, we just grabbed all our shit, left most of it behind and just peeled out to where we knew we were destabilizing the region so much that the people that we've been fighting for 20 years were just going to slurp it right up? Is it any more far-fetched than that? Is it any more far-fetched to say that they think that they are just going to war their way out of this predicament that they made for all of us and never take any responsibility for any of it? I don't know. I hope it's not.
Well, here's the thing. Despite David opening that can of worms and, forcing us almost into what this podcast is, the title of it says we do is destroy memes. That is a highly destructive meme, which we neither have the time nor the energy to destroy right here in what's left of this episode. But I will link articles to the show notes page and in the description down below, completely destroying this stupid fucking meme that has existed since World War II, that war cures economic depressions, right? That it started there with, well, it's the mobilization and the creation of things, like tanks and bombs and planes and whatever, that actually pulled us out of the Great Depression. Which, again, if you think about it on a kindergarten level for more than 2 fucking seconds, how can you possibly create economic disparity or prosperity by simply building things to then blow them up? Oh, and by the way, while you're doing it, you're taking your absolute most productive workers in your entire country, young males, and sending them over to Europe to die as if that's somehow going to make your economy stronger. It doesn't even pass the laugh test. And yet, probably to David's point, this is what Keynesians argue for why war is beneficial to an economy. Because it, quote unquote, stimulates aggregate demand. The government steps in as a big purchaser of weapons and things like that and spends money, right? The velocity of money concept again. And so, again, if your theory's wrong, you're going to get the diagnosis wrong. If you think that just spending money for the sake of it, building large multi-million-dollar ships, sailing them out to the middle of the ocean and sinking them is going to somehow create a richer world, if that's what you really think an economy is based on, then you're going to have stupid, idiotic, more memes like that, and you're going to advocate for policies like that. Are they cynical enough to do that? Of course they are, but that doesn't make them any less wrong or stupid. But I'll link to those articles, which gives you all of the information, the GDP facts, and everything that surrounds that discussion that shows you why that is categorically incorrect. But that doesn't get past the point that we're making in this episode, is that this is why it's important to understand the theory. And this is why it's important to know that these decision makers like Chair Powell and the rest of the people in the Federal Reserve System, why they continue getting things wrong. Because their theory is constantly coming up with cures that kill the patient. And so understanding that yourself will help you see the direction that they're going, set up your own life affairs accordingly to try to plan for the impending storm that they're creating.
All I want to tie this up with a bow with is be wary over the next coming months of there being an impending crisis that the American military unit has to address. I don't want to be a fortune teller. I don't want to be a future seer. But you're either going to lay off 1.3 million people to try to correct this economy, or you're going to go the other way. And again, it's what I've been saying with everybody that has brought this topic up to me. It's like you either take your medicine now or you kick the can down the road and it becomes a bigger problem now. If you grab that snowball when it starts rolling down the hill, it doesn't become the boulder. It doesn't become the huge mass that takes out an entire village at the bottom of the fucking mountain. But you have to take it then. And yeah, your hand's going to be cold. You're going to have to warm it up. It's going to be fucking painful, whatever. But it's a shite side better than letting an entire village get wiped out because you didn't do the right thing in the first place. And that's what's happening right now. We didn't take our medicine at the beginning of this when we enacted all these policies that we almost just pulled a lever and just bailed out. Like, nobody thought about the consequences. And then when they saw the consequences, they kicked that can down the road. Now we're seeing that kicked can again. You want to kick it again? What's going to be next time? 2.6?
Well, I mean, 1.3 is his estimate, but he could adjust that up as often as he wants.
Well, I was just doubling it. You know what usually happens?
2.6, 5, 10, who cares? Whatever it takes to get inflation down as far as he's concerned.
That's the implication. Or option B, we go to world war again. Like, there's no good options here. Take your medicine now. Do it for the right reasons and know what you're doing it for. Or option B, kick the can down the road and then let your sons and daughters die in a fucking war that means nothing, that they're just trying to correct their balance on. Which is basically every war that's ever been fought. But before we get more depressing, Dane, final thoughts.
I think they should find, or they already found because they're listening or watching this episode, they should share this episode with friends and family at www.podcast.com/114. Search any podcast catcher and just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. Look for episode 114. The videos, YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey, just again, search Weapons of Meme Destruction, or join the broader conversation on Twitter and Instagram, and hopefully at some point in the not too distant future, also TikTok again. Just search Weapons of Meme Destruction. And with all that being said, we'll see you on episode 115. Hopefully 1.3 million of you aren't thrown out of a job. But if 1.3 million of you are thrown out of a job by episode 115, we would really appreciate you becoming subscribers to the show so we can point you in the direction of where your IR should be.
We'll re-employ you.
Your IR should be looking in terms of who to blame for why you're now unemployed, because hint, hint, wink, wink, it ain't greedy corporations or whoever Elizabeth Warren wants you to think it is. It's her buddies over at the Federal Reserve and the rest of the regime that's running the show up there in DC that are responsible for this. So be mad at them. They suck. Let's get rid of them.
With that light note, Dane, listener, viewer, compatriot, comrade, stay safe, but more importantly, stay free.